Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HPL Gallery's Artist Talk series. My name is Jennifer, and today I am so excited to introduce to you artist and educator Carlton Nell. Carlton is a painter that I might categorize as a landscape minimalist because he reduces his imagery down to the bare minimum in this way that foregrounds color and texture. But he also somehow feels very grounded in narrative painting, and his work often through his use of movement and perspective appears to depict a very precise moment or event. But with that, I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to Carlton to introduce himself and show us his work. Thank you so much for doing this today, Carlton. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm good. Thanks, Jennifer, for inviting me on. Yeah, this is exciting to be able to talk to you guys about my work. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm a painter and I do a lot of drawing also. I teach drawing at Auburn, and I've been at Auburn for almost 30 years now. And I really love teaching, and I love what I teach. But part of the year, when I'm not teaching, even while I am teaching, I'm in the studio. So as a faculty, we're that's part of our practice. Is part of our responsibilities is to be exhibiting work, producing work, and exhibiting. But I would do it anyway. I mean, that's what I do. So I'd like, we can talk about, I'm on the website now that shows some of my newest work. The painting you see here is part of a group of paintings that were done on a sabbatical last year. These are larger pictures that originate from smaller pictures that originate from observation. And so I painted 4 of those pictures, and then I have some drawings that are new that are also based on observation as well. And all the work is derived originally from things that I see around me. None of it's really made up. Now there's a lot of, at times there's memories, I have to remember what I see. So, I fill in gaps that become somewhat less, it's not always direct observation, in other words. Yeah. I can talk about each picture in a way and kind of just go through the process. So a lot of what I see is when I'm driving in the car, really, honestly, it's kind of sad to say, but most of it is driving. A lot of it, though, is not. It's here when I'm walking. I spend a lot of time in the woods, and so I see things that, for whatever reason, I credit it. The reason I think that I want to make a picture based on these incidents is because they somehow already have the characters of a picture in them, and they seem like they are more likely to end up as an interesting artistic treatment because of their inherent pictorial characteristics. So in the case of the picture you see here, there was a shadow falling across hills at various times on my drive home from work, and these pastures. And so it was interesting, and I thought, it's a simple arrangement of colors and shapes, and why don't I try that, try giving that an artistic treatment. And so it starts out with a sketch to try to remember what I've seen. So I'll make a sketch with quick notes. I have a little book that has hundreds of little thumbnail sketches, and then I work those up to a smaller painting. And I have some smaller paintings like this one. I was walking out of the woods at night or late evening, and this foreground tree against the colorful sky and the stars and the distant trees sort of struck me as something that might have potential. So I made a sketch, and then I made a small painting. This painting is 6 inches by 10 inches. And then hundreds of these small paintings are out there. Actually, they are not considered studies. They're actually paintings in their own right. But I've selected a few of those that I thought might have potential for larger paintings. And so that's where this one did not become a larger painting, or it hasn't yet. I suppose it could someday. But this was a painting of a shadow on a hill in a smaller version. Started out as a sketch, then a smaller painting. And then I decided to expand the potential for color in a larger picture and texture as well. And you can kind of see some of that color and texture. So this one is 36 by 60 in the same proportion, just 6 times the size. And it's been exciting to me. I love the small paintings and kind of the intimacy of those. To me, they're more about the idea of what I see and its translation into a painting, an object, an artifact. But the larger picture seems to me to be even more about the artifact because it's big, because it's all more about those formal qualities of color and texture and shape and that sort of thing. I would say, just kind of my own theory of why I want to do painting and drawing as well, is that to me it's just the perfect mediator, and I think that's why it's lasted so long. I think it's like a song or a story. I don't see it going away because it translates so well the outside world to the inside world of our minds. It speaks both languages fluently. It sits in our mind in a way that we can communicate with it, but it also references the world around us and allows us sort of this bridge between the two, I think. And I don't see that ever really, can't see that changing. You know, you do hear people say that maybe painting is dead, or it's, I haven't heard that recently, but 10 years ago or so, I was hearing that because there's so many other ways to make art. This just seems like a simple, direct way to do it to me, to respond in kind of a plain spoken, straightforward way to this kind of big, I don't want to sound too cornball, but this really big place around us that's, I don't know, for me, it's just so fascinating. I want to kind of respond to it in a direct way that hits both worlds, the mental world, and acknowledges that world outside of us. Some more images. This one was derived from just, this is an evening primrose subject that I had in my garden. And it was interesting to me the way the light came through. And I, again, thought, well, maybe that would make a nice artistic treatment. I did a smaller version, which is one of, let's see, not there. The smaller version is in here somewhere among the new work. And then I went up with it right here. I decided to edit. You can see there's a lot of editing from the smaller painting to the larger painting. I decided to isolate and sort of maybe draw a little comparison. It's hard to see, but there's a kind of a cloud image here on the left, upper left, and the projection of the light through the image, or the flower, the light projecting an image onto the flower petal. I thought that was interesting. Jennifer mentioned this moment, and I've been thinking about motion and how the world around me is alive, but the painting is not moving, and I think that's part of the beauty of the painting and the object, the itself. The artifact is quiet. It doesn't impose itself it doesn't impose motion or sound on the viewer, but can that be implied? And so I was trying to think of ways. We don't get snow very often here, so it's pretty magical for me to see it. And this was at night, and the light from the window looking outside, reflecting on the snow. Here's a detail. I'm trying to capture some of the sparkle of the ice crystal catching the light. So motion has been something I've been kind of sort of trying to imply in some of these, or some hint at life. This was taken from a camping trip in the Smokies. Again, the smaller version, it's down in this group somewhere. That's one of the drawings. I can't remember. Well, here's another smaller version of leaves falling in this sort of snowfall way that was fascinating in the fall to me. The image struck me that the stars just sort of made a carpet against, we're up on a mountain in the Smokies, and there was just a carpet of stars through the trees. But then, around us were these hundreds of fireflies. I'd never seen anything like it. We have fireflies here, but there. And then I understand that's kind of a unique phenomenon to the Smokies. So I found that out later, but I just thought the relationship had an artistic treatment potential. So I did a smaller version. This is the larger version as part of that sabbatical. And you can see a detail of the stars through the trees, and a detail of the firefly images in the darkness. Truly, there were hundreds. I couldn't believe it. They weren't as bright as the ones that we have, but these little sparkles all through the bushes. And so these are some of the drawings, which are silver on film. And the silver is a little more permanent than graphite, is the one reason I use it. It doesn't smudge as easily, and I feel like the image just has a little more permanence and lasting power, not only while I'm working with it, but even afterwards. These are not on paper, so I think they're going to be a little more archival. They should be, and the silver should be fairly archival too. These are on drafting film, so that they're not quite as delicate as a drawing on paper. But the film also offers some opportunities for depth and things that I like, particularly with this cloud subject matter. And the clouds these are very small. You can see 4x7. And I just really liked the idea of this grand natural thing that we have around us all the time that we can observe, that's ever changing too. That's kind of the cool thing about these big thunderclouds and things. They don't change. I mean, they're huge. They're bigger than mountains, yet they don't change. Yeah, I've always thought it'd be fun to live in the mountains and you get to look at the mountain view, but in a way we get a little more than that in some ways, because we get this ever-changing kind of sculptural presence. And so these are a few of those, and the attempt again is to look for opportunities for artistic treatment of subjects around me, and in this case, the tonal qualities of the subject and the monumentality of it was of what I was interested in. The silver is an old technique. It's a piece of silver wire that is sterling silver that is a little stylus like a pencil, sharpened pencil, and the film takes it very well, I think, and so it seems to be a way to treat these subjects that maybe can be interesting and capture some of the sense of what happens when something that's very, very big, monumental in relation to us, capture it in a intimate and delicate kind of small artifact.
I think the medium really translates your intention really well. Um, they for me reference black and white photographs too, and so and that analog process kind of has a dynamic or relationship to drawing too now.
Right. And of course it is the same material as a black and white photograph. It's silver. And in the case of the drawings, there is more photographic reference. That the clouds are so ephemeral that, as you know, they're changing so quickly that I have to take photographs to take notes. There's just no way. Some things I can, the shadow on the hill, that original image, I can kind of remember that much information, but there's just no way to remember the complications and the way light is. I just can't remember what it looked like. I can remember the fact that I thought it was striking, and maybe it's something that could be translated into a piece of artwork, but I really have to have the photograph, even though these are not direct, And in the case of this one, the big cloud on the right may have been further away than the larger cloud on the left in real life. But, so I'm taking some liberties for compositional purposes in most all of these. But I do rely on at least composites of photographs. I think in this image, there were maybe 3 or 4 photographs. There was a situation, this situation where the rain is, I'm in the car and the rain's falling. There are big clouds, huge cumulonimbus type clouds underneath an even bigger cloud. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And the rain's falling across the other clouds and that sort of thing. And the light's trying to break through. That's very interesting to look at in real life. Maybe it would be interesting to make a drawing. But I do want to stress too that if you want to look at clouds, go out and look at real clouds. Don't look at these pictures. These are to be looked at as drawings that use clouds as their imagery and try to tap into some of the sense of clouds and what we get. But I would never want to say these are anything like experiencing the real thing. It's a different experience. Hopefully it's composed in such a way that there's some emotion, or that it maybe implies a sense of acknowledgement and wonder and mystery.
Well, the southern landscape is translated very well in your work. And from my perspective, I'm not from the South, I'm from California, and I never experienced the relationship between weather and the landscape until I moved here. And it's very, very dynamic and overpowering. And it almost feels like the landscape and the weather is trying to eat you sometimes.
Yeah, right.
And
right. Yeah, it is alive, and I hope that I hope that that the life and the, I know again, it all sounds kind of trite, and I, people that respond to the landscape, artists are number in the hundreds of thousands probably. So I'm not claiming that. I realize that that the subject matter is very common. But I do think that it is alive, and I hope that there's some mystery that we all can kind of appreciate only in some way that is unique to us. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. I mean, it's very challenging to make work about landscape and make it interesting because of that, I think. And so your work is very successful in that approach. And I think that's because you're also talking very much about painting and the act of painting and drawing, and your work is very much about texture and light and color. Show us some more of your paintings.
Okay, let's see. I'll scroll through. These are part of that group of drawings.
But your texture is just so dominant.
This is another small one. I don't know if this would ever become a large one, and I really get excited about the larger ones because I'm excited about the texture and the color and the shapes and the relationships of all of that. Hence the titles of these composition. They're all titled that way. But I really get excited about what can happen when they go big, and the color can, particularly with color. And I look at I look at artists that and I envy their ability to use color. I'm trying to stay faithful to what I see because I don't want this to become surreal imagery or fantastical. I really want to acknowledge that this is information that's gone into a brain through the eyes and has come out as an artifact. So I want that. I'm interested in that. That is fascinating to me, and that's why I like teaching drawing, because I think it's simple, yet it is. I tell my students it's simple, not simplistic. Simplistic being uncomplicated but shallow. The act of drawing is uncomplicated, can be, but profound. The fact that we can actually interact with the world and create an artifact that records our interaction, it can be a really deep and moving experience with the world around us. So I'm very interested in that. So I try to stay true to the color now. But the large ones allow me to experiment a little bit within the color. So in the case of the grays here of these trees, or the blue of the sky, I'm able with the large ones to introduce other colors to build the gray. It's just hard to do on the small scale. These are, again, these are 6 inches by 10 inches. So it's almost on my screen about actual size. This was an image that, I was in a meeting and I'm looking out into the Graves Amphitheater at Auburn, and there are these big century-old pine trees. It's the most, to me, it's just the cathedral of the campus. These pine trees are so tall and the canopy is so far up there. I mean, they actually, they're not replacing them like I wish they would, because lightning hits one and they don't seem to replant another one, whoever's tree planters on campus are. But it's a treasure that, so I was in a meeting looking out a window on an upper story, and so that's where this image was derived, that, that the space created and and the flattened space between the trees and then the trees going into the distance, that sort of thing was interesting. And I made a little sketch on my agenda. So those are the kinds of, this one is what I thought was an interesting, might be interesting to somebody, of where the image came from, just in a meeting. Another backlit cumulonimbus, a thunderhead cloud, and then there were a couple of trees that I thought the relationship of those two big, I think they were pecan trees maybe, or maybe they were oak trees. Just the relationship of the two trees in space I found interesting. The backlit tree in the foreground with the edges of moss catching the light.
This is one of my favorites because it's such an unexpected choice to bring your frame like so close, you know, and have that be like you taking up so much of your canvas.
Yeah, and I was really into the complexity of those little negative spaces and the weaving them, and so the simplicity of the big foreground tree that's kind of in your space, and then I was trying, I don't know if it works completely, but trying to, in all of these, kind of provide some ambiguity of what's in our mind. Are the complex spaces coming forward and on the same plane with the foreground image? Are they just shapes of pattern? Can they become shapes of pattern in our mind and yet also be an acknowledgement of what was observed, trees, sky, light? So I'm thinking about those kinds of things. Again, some of this is so idiosyncratic. This is the smaller version of the firefly picture that, I sort of maybe took too many liberties with the color in the sky, almost like fireworks or something. And so I backed off a little of that. I thought, no, that looks too fanciful. When I did the larger one. This one's difficult to see. It's very dark, but the mystery of a dark ocean at night it's scary. It's almost as if there is nothing beyond the waves that are hitting the shore at your feet. That it's just a black holes essentially. And I was really fascinated by that walking along the beach at night. It's difficult to see this one because it's so dark, but there were some foreground waves. But then when I looked up, I could see some stars that were faintly showing through the moisture that sort of is in the air at night at the beach. And I don't know if you can see my cursor moving around here, but there are some faint stars. And then as I looked up, the stars got brighter because I'm not looking through so much atmosphere. So that image, difficult to see. I do hope that image, maybe I want to do that one larger if I can. This is the original smaller version of that snowstorm that I showed earlier. Again, I mentioned the falling of the trees, falling of the leaves in the fall, and the way that they just kind of surround you like confetti. And that seemed to have potential for a picture.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites too, of your new work.
Thank you. It's again, I spend a lot of time in the woods. And when I say a lot of time, I mean a really lot of time, sometimes maybe more time. As a matter of fact, I plan to spend this evening a couple of hours. Now they've got more daylight. and I like to go in the woods before it gets too hot and spidery. Um,
And
so
snaky.
yeah, snakes and things. So I'm gonna today. I think since the rain is not, I don't think it's going to materialize like I thought
Mhm.
this evening. I'm hoping to go for a couple hours. Um, so yeah, those images, and I look at some artists like someone like Neil Welliver, who can paint all the complexity of 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 these Maine woods that he's painting. Um, I don't know how he does it, and I'm in awe that he can paint it the complex details of things, yet they are very abstracted surfaces of color and pattern and shape. Um, and to me, he really finds that sweet spot of object versus subject. The
Mhm.
object of the artifact perfectly balanced with the subject that he's, acknowledging, and the image of the subject, and that's, and so he's been an inspiration, or someone that I've really looked at a lot. Alex Katz, his distillation of the world and observation of it, but able to distill it without it seeming like, while still seeming like it's been observed. Um, I love the work of Ryder, and all those. I mean, the paintings are coming apart now, but just the object quality of those things, like they're like an ancient artifact discovered in a vault, or I don't know, a monastery or something somewhere. I look at a lot of British painters. I have a whole stack of modern painters magazines that I was given years ago. They're pushing 30 years old now, but I just can't get past the fact that the painted surface with color and texture and shape and pattern and just pure aesthetic elements, formal elements, can be given value by the way those elements are arranged. And an image that maybe can have some associations. And I look at those British painters like Frank Auerbach and Leon Kossoff, and I still, it's all fresh. David Hockney.
Mhm.
So that's those magazines have been a big influence. Like I say, I was given a big stack, and I go through them a couple of times a year, just poring over just some of the uh, imagery, but and good writing on painting in those magazines. It just sort of focuses on that discipline, and been very helpful for me in my thinking. I know it's created biases that I have to acknowledge. Uh, I do like a lot of the American painters, like I mentioned, Alex Katz, Fairfield Porter,
Mhm.
and the way he can distill the world around him to a to an artifact, a set of formal elements that have meaning is, I think he's one of the best for me. Um, there are others, but those are some of the folks that I keep kind of coming back to and sort of admiring and wishing I could somehow tap into whatever magic they've been able to find in their work.
Yeah. When I look at your work, I think of Hockney and Katz and how they're able to like have a very distinct visual language that's all their own, and you do the same thing, and it's they feel like they're engaging with illustration in this way too, that is, I think, very, very interesting.
Yeah. And I should say I do have a background in illustration, and I'm sure that influences greatly the fact that I'm depicting things. And but I'm glad. I really appreciate the illustration background because, some of these artists that I admire had that, like
Right.
Edward Hopper and Wayne Thiebaud and others that I admire their work. And I think that the illustration gave me a skill set that allows me, if I want to make something look somewhat representational, I at least have that skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but your hand is very present and strong. Like there's an identity to it. It's not just photorealism.
Right. Yeah. I hope they don't. Become. I hope the work is not just a depiction of something. Again, if you want to see that thing, don't look at a depiction. Go see it. Go out there.
No, there's a very raw quality and that's a really hard thing to do, right? It's to not be too good, not be too perfect.
Yeah. I've got a friend, Don Eddy, who is known for, and he doesn't like the label photorealism because these things, when you look at them closely, they're abstracted little circular shapes that build the image. But yeah, I think I read something where he alluded to that. Yeah, he's not as Donald Cuspid actually did a monograph, and he mentioned that. He said that, Don talks about, I could make it more realistic, but that would interfere.
Why don't you scroll through some more just to kind of give the audience much more of an overview of your work? And we're getting close to time, so let me throw in my last question while you just kind of scroll through some stuff, because it's such a joy to see your work, even though it's not anything close to experiencing it in real life. It's still nice to see all of the different ways that you approach your subject matter. And you do this a lot with dark pieces too, that I think is really interesting. And they end up being kind of sculptural too with your texture. And there's a lot of work that's being made like this right now too. Texture is, I think, something that's like you said, painting was dead 10 years ago, or they thought it was dead, but now it's kind of back, that it survived that kill, and there's so much energy around painting right now and texture.
Yeah. And I can understand if, I sort of understand that why someone would think that painting would be somewhat obsolete, but again, there's always a new song being written that's worth listening to, and there's always a new story worth reading. And I just think it's that kind of thing. This is a detail of that picture, the sky detail of that. I also wonder if we're so used to the flat screen and the kind of artificial electronic sort of inhuman quality of the screen that real texture, real three-dimensional stuff maybe has a little different. Maybe it's refreshing now. Maybe that explains some of the.
I think so. Yeah. And I'm glad you're going through this work, because the texture in these is something that you haven't really discussed yet. And it's so crazy the way that you build your image with this texture.
This is a detail of this one. These are all large paintings. They're 48 by 80, so they're bigger than the ones before that I showed early from the sabbatical work. But again, the pecan trees offer a lot of this filigree of light showing through, because they're kind of thinner in their canopy. And so I had a lot of pecan trees around me, and I still do. And and they make good subjects. And so I like to sort of emphasize those speckles and fragments of light that are coming through.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me jump in with my last question. We're getting up to 40 minutes. One unusual and minor element that stands out to me when viewing your work is your devotion to the long horizontal canvas. And I know you don't work on canvas, but I'm just utilizing that term for this moment. But because your subject matter is almost always the landscape, I can see why this is your chosen format. But for me, this size makes your work very cinematic and references the film frame and cinema. Perhaps it also subtly increases your viewer's ability to see the painting as a moment and connect with it and as a time-based medium. Have you always worked in this size? And what are your thoughts on this format and its embedded visual references?
The format is not quite as wide as in proportion as a movie screen, at least the widescreen proportion, the panoramic kind of proportion. But I do intend that it be horizontal because I do want, for one thing, the frame of our eyes is essentially a little more horizontal than vertical. And I do want this sense that this work entered into somebody's head through their eyes and has that very personal, this is somebody looking at the world idea.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I hope that the viewers would say, yeah, I can relate to that. It's not just completely personal. There's some universal. I mean, I would like to make, excuse me, I would love to make pictures that no matter who saw it from any place, any time, anywhere, in any time in history could look at the picture and say, yeah, there's something there for me. So I want to make that connection. I think that would be cool if the work never didn't relate to any person at any time and from any place. But also, it kind of helps me just purely practically. I'm composing. I mean, again, the composition, these are called after, as you see the title, because it's after the original one, which was composition 184. And this is a detail of the one before it. But if I have this sort of preset boundary, I'm trying to compose within that. If I change that to a square or to a vertical format, I just feel like that's an extra layer that I don't really want to tackle for composing. I probably should, but it just seems to simplify what I have to. I know going into it, I'm going to be working with this proportion. It's somewhat close to the golden mean, so it feels kind of comfortable, I think, in terms of just the height to width, or the golden ratio. But if that's not intentional, I think maybe that's coincidental. So yeah, I like the idea that maybe, as you say, it can seem like a moment in time that someone has experienced in the world. So yeah, there probably is that association that you mentioned. Yeah. I don't think this is closer to a 35 millimeter frame size from film camera size. So it's closer to that than the movie screen. And there may be some association there because photography is one of my major ways of sketching and note taking. I do a lot of sketching, but a lot of the imagery I have to photograph to try to get the representation I want. So yeah, I'm sure there's that influence.
It's not something I've really ever noticed before, but when I saw your rectangle, that you stick with, That made me think about it. If you were working in the vertical, you would be referencing something completely different. I think you're referencing painting. I think, but when I see artists that are similar to you and they work in the vertical format, I think they're talking much more about painting. I think that the format
That's
does
right.
a lot. It does a lot for what kind of things you trigger in the viewer.
I agree, and I've thought a lot about that. It certainly, a vertical picture would flatten the space, and I think would likely speak more to the surface. I do want to talk about the picture plane and the two-dimensional surface, that mental construct. I mentioned that before, but I want to also. I'm just trying to find that sort of sweet spot, like I said, that kind of captures that sits in both worlds, the mental world and the world of the object and the formal qualities that the object presents.
Well, this was really great, Carlton. I just can't thank you enough for being willing to take time out of your day and share your work with us. It's just so enjoyable to look at an artist's work and hear them talk about it at the same time and get some kind of like insights into their practice.
Well, thank you. I hope that I thank you for. I hope it's been interesting, and I thank you for again reaching out.
It is. Okay.
Appreciate that.
And thank you to everyone for watching. See you next time.